It was around 2000 BC. The sun was setting over the Jordan Valley, and from the hilltop, the cities of the plain looked like jewels scattered across green velvet. Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim. Cities so wealthy that the book of Genesis compares their valley to the garden of God himself. And standing on that hilltop was a young man named Lot, looking at all of it, calculating, measuring, choosing. But what Lot did not know, what he could not have known, was that the green valley he was about to claim had already been marked for fire, that every step towards Sodom was a step away from God, and that one day, decades from now, an angel would have to physically grab his hand and drag him from the inferno he had chosen to call home. "This is mine," Lot thought as he gazed at the plain. "All of this is mine." And the great tragedy of his life began with that single thought. His name was Lot. His father, Haran, had died young in the city of Ur of the Chaldeans, a sprawling Mesopotamian metropolis of ziggurats and silver and 1,000 idols. And so the boy Lot was raised by his uncle. That uncle was a man you have heard of. His name was Abraham. Together they walked out of Ur. Together they crossed deserts. Together they went down into Egypt during the famine. And together they came back up, richer than they had ever been. Genesis tells us that Abraham was very wealthy in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And Lot, walking in his uncle's shadow, had grown rich along with him. Flocks, herds, tents, servants who carried his name on their lips. But the land was not big enough for both of them. The grass thinned out, the wells ran low, and the herdsmen of Abraham and the herdsmen of Lot began to argue at the watering holes. The arguments turned into shoves. The shoves turned into fistfights. And Genesis pauses here to drop one line that should have made them both nervous. "And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land." Translation: pagan tribes were watching. A fractured family was easy prey. So Abraham did something that no patriarch in the ancient world was supposed to do. He gathered his nephew at the edge of the camp, and he gave the younger man the choice. He said, "Let there be no strife between you and me. Is not the whole land before you? If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." The elder yielded to the younger. The covenant-bearer offered first pick to the dependent. It was an act of faith so radical it bordered on madness, because Abraham was placing his entire future in the hands of God, refusing to grasp at it with his own. And then he waited to see what kind of man his nephew really was. Lot looked up, not toward heaven, toward the horizon. The hill where the two men stood faced east. Below them, the Jordan River ran like a silver thread through a valley so green it did not look like Canaan at all. It looked like Egypt. It looked like the Garden of Eden before the fall. Wheat fields, vineyards, cattle grazing in fat herds, and rising from that valley, 4 cities, and the largest of them was Sodom. The Bible records the moment with a phrase that should make every reader pause. It says, "Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere." He chose with his eyes. He did not pray. He did not ask his uncle which direction the Lord had spoken about. He did not consider that the men of Sodom were already known across Canaan as wicked, exceeding sinners against the Lord. He looked. He calculated. He chose. "This is the better land," Lot thought. "Anyone can see that." And that was the problem. Anyone could see it. That was exactly why God had not chosen it. Lot pointed east. He turned his back on his uncle. He gathered his wagons, his wives' sisters, his servants, his herds, and he marched down the hill toward the green valley. Genesis tells us he pitched his tent toward Sodom. Not in Sodom yet, toward it. The compromise was already aiming somewhere, and the arrow does not miss. There is a kind of choice that does not feel like a fork in the road. It feels like the obvious answer, and those are the choices that decide everything. That was Lot, walking toward Sodom. And the moment he disappeared over the ridge, God spoke to Abraham. The Lord said, "Lift up your eyes from the place where you are. Look north and south, east and west. All the land that you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever." 2 men lifted their eyes that day. One lifted them at a green valley and lost everything. The other lifted them at the will of God and inherited a nation. And the difference between them was not intelligence. It was not luck. It was the question they were answering when they looked. Years passed. Lot's wealth grew. So did his proximity to Sodom. In Mamre, Abraham was watering his sheep at the noon well when the messenger came running. The horsemen had come at dawn, 4 kings out of the east. A coalition led by Chedorlaomer of Elam had swept down on the valley of Siddim with chariots and bronze and the cold mathematics of empire. The 5 kings of the plain rode out to meet them. The 5 kings of the plain were crushed. Some of their men fell into the tar pits that pocked the valley floor and never came out. The rest fled into the hills, and the conquerors had poured into the cities of the plain, Sodom first, and stripped them. They took the gold, they took the grain, they took the women, they took the men. And among the captives marching north under spears that day was a man whose tents were no longer pitched toward Sodom. He had moved inside the walls. He had become a citizen. His name was Lot. The servant who had escaped collapsed at Abraham's feet, his sandals dark with blood. "Your nephew has been taken." Abraham did not pause. He armed his 318 trained men, servants born in his own house, and he marched. Through the night, up the spine of Canaan, into the dark country north of Damascus. 318 men chasing 4 armies. 318 men, each one with a wife, each one with children waiting back at the camp. One of them, perhaps the youngest, his beard still soft, had left behind a pregnant wife and a barley field unplowed, marching into the dark to rescue a man he had only seen in passing, to rescue someone who had chosen the very city they were now marching toward. That was the cost of Lot's choice. Other men's families, other men's lives, faith on the road, paying for the bill of sight. They struck at night. They scattered the Eastern coalition. They brought back every captive, every woman, every wagon, every coin. And they brought back Lot. And here, on the road south of Damascus, Lot stood at a fork in his life. Abraham reined his camel in beside him, the dust of the rescue still on both of them, the smoke of distant Sodom still smudging the southern sky. Abraham did not lecture. He looked at his nephew the way a man looks at a son he is about to lose, and he said, "Come back with me, Lot. Come home to Mamre. The valley is not done with you." Lot did not look at his uncle. He looked south toward the smoke.
"It was a fluke, Uncle. They will rebuild. My place is there."
They will rebuild, he was thinking. I will rebuild with them. This is just a setback. And he turned the wagons south. The capacity for self-deception is a strange thing. It can survive the burning of a city. It cannot survive the fire of God. He sat there now, not as a guest, as a judge. Genesis 19 opens with one short Hebrew phrase that almost everyone reads past. It says, Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. In English, it sounds like he was loitering. In Hebrew, it is a different word entirely, yashab. The same verb used for kings on thrones, the same verb used for judges on the bench. In the ancient Near East, the city gate was not where you waited around. It was the supreme court. It was the town hall. The recessed stone chambers in the gateway were lined with benches where the elders sat, adjudicating property disputes, ratifying contracts, sealing covenants, pronouncing legal judgments on the people of the city. To sit at the gate was to govern. Lot was a magistrate of Sodom. The man who had once trembled in his uncle's shadow now wore the robes of office. The man whose tents had once been pitched toward the city now passed sentence inside it. He had assimilated so completely that the people of Sodom recognized him as one of their own. He was respectable. He was successful. He was a judge in a city of monsters. And yet, here is the strangest twist in the whole biblical record. The New Testament refuses to call him wicked. 3 times in 2 verses, the Apostle Peter calls him righteous Lot. He says Lot's soul was vexed by the unlawful deeds of Sodom day after day, that this righteous man living among them tormented his soul over the lawless conduct he saw and heard. Read that carefully. Lot saw. Lot heard. Lot was tormented. But Lot did not leave. This is the most haunting kind of believer there is, the man who knows, the man who is grieved by the sin around him, the man who shudders inwardly at every conversation in the marketplace, every shrieked obscenity in the street, every act of cruelty in the court he himself presides over. And yet, every morning he ties his sandals and walks back to that same gate to take his seat among the men whose wickedness is destroying his own soul. That afternoon, 2 strangers walked through the gate. Lot saw them and rose from his bench. One look at their faces, clean, otherworldly, foreign, and he knew. He knew exactly what kind of city he had brought them into. He knew exactly what would happen if they stayed in the public square after dark. "Don't stay here tonight," he must have thought, watching them. "Don't you know what this place is?" He insisted they come to his house. He pressed them. He would not take no for an answer. And as he led the 2 angels down the narrow streets toward his own door, the sun went down over Sodom for the last time. The bread was still warm on the table. His wife had set out unleavened loaves. There had been no time to leaven anything. The guests had arrived suddenly. The lamps burned olive oil and threw long shadows up the stone walls. The 2 strangers ate quietly. Lot's daughters watched from the doorway, curious. The smell of the warm bread mingled with the cooler night air drifting in through the courtyard. And then, footsteps in the street. Many footsteps. The first knock was a fist. The second knock was a hammer. The third knock was every shoulder in Sodom hitting the door at once. Voices outside. Dozens of voices, then hundreds. Genesis records something here that should chill the blood of anyone who reads it carefully. It says the men of Sodom surrounded the house, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. Every quarter. The whole city. Every man in Sodom, unanimous in evil. There were no decent men hiding indoors that night. There were no children too young. The corruption was total. The entire urban population had become one mob with one demand. They shouted through the door, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out that we may know them." The Hebrew word for know is the same word used for marital intimacy. The mob was demanding to rape the visitors. And the Apostle Jude, writing centuries later, made absolutely sure no reader would soften this, calling Sodom's sin strange flesh and unnatural lust. This was the night a city demanded to commit gang rape against angels of God. Lot stepped outside. He shut the door behind him. He pleaded. He called them brothers. He begged them not to do this wicked thing. And then, God help him, he made an offer that should never have left his lips. He offered his daughters. Stop. Read that again. Lot, the only righteous man in Sodom, the man whom Peter calls righteous 3 times, the man whose soul was tormented day after day by the wickedness of this very city, Lot offered his own virgin daughters to a violent mob to save 2 strangers. We have been told this is a story about Sodom's evil. We have heard it preached as a warning about out there. But the most disturbing scene in this whole chapter is not in the street. It is on Lot's doorstep. Sodom did not put those words in his mouth. Sodom just gave him an audience. The rot was already inside the house. There is a kind of compromise that begins so small you never notice when it stops being small. By the time you can see it clearly, it has already eaten everything you used to be. The angels did not wait for Lot to dig himself any deeper. A hand shot out of the doorway. They yanked their host back inside, and then they did something to the mob outside that the men of Sodom could not understand. The angels struck them with blindness, and Genesis says the men outside wearied themselves to find the door. Picture that. A whole city fumbling. Hundreds of men groping in the dark, hands stretched out, finding nothing but stone walls. Their eyes were already blind to God. Now their bodies matched their souls. The man right next to the door could not see it. The man 2 feet away could not find it. They stumbled in circles in their own city, and the door of mercy stood right there, and not one of them touched it. By the time they finally gave up and crawled away to their houses, the angels had told Lot what was coming. The city had until dawn. The first light of day touched the eastern hills. Lot ran out into the dark streets one last time. He pounded on the doors of the men engaged to his daughters, his future sons-in-law. He shouted at them through the wood.
Get out! Right now! The Lord is going to destroy this city.
Genesis records their response in 9 of the most devastating words in the Bible. He seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. They laughed at him. Years of compromise had come due in that single moment. Lot had spent decades blending in, decades sitting at the gate, decades pronouncing judgments in the name of a sodomite court instead of the God of his uncle Abraham. He had wanted to be respectable in their eyes. He had succeeded, and now, on the one morning his words had to mean something, his words meant nothing at all. He had no spiritual authority left to spend. He had spent it all buying status. He walked back through the dark streets alone. His sons-in-law would die in their beds. And then, in his own house, Lot did something almost unbelievable. He lingered. The Hebrew word is mahmah. It means to drag your feet, to delay, to refuse to go. It is the verb used of soldiers who will not march into battle. The angels had told him. He had told his daughters. He knew. He had seen the mob. He had heard the verdict. And his feet would not move. What was he hesitating for? The house, the furniture, the accounts at the gate, the robes of office, the years of climbing, the wealth he had once chosen with his eyes from a hilltop in Canaan. The angels did not argue with him. They grabbed him. Genesis 19:16 is one of the most merciful verses in all of Scripture. It says, "And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth, and set him without the city." He did not save himself. He could not save himself. He was dragged from the burning building by sheer, unmerited mercy, because the Lord remembered Abraham's prayer the day before. Lot did not even have enough faith to walk out of his own death. God had to do it for him. And then the command, sharp as a sword.
Flee for your life. Do not look behind you. Do not stop in the plain. Flee to the mountain, lest you be consumed.
They ran. Behind them, in Sodom, there were thousands. Mothers pulling warm bread out of clay ovens. fathers haggling over fish in the morning market. One woman, perhaps not yet awake, would have heard her husband call from the doorway about a strange light building in the eastern sky. She would have set down whatever was in her hands. She would have walked toward the door. And in that step, somewhere between her table and her threshold, the sky would have opened above her. Every family in that city had a face. Every child had a name. Every door that had pounded on Lot's house the night before stood now between a person and the fire. And then it came. Lot, running, heard a sound he had never heard before in his life. Not the roar of fire, not thunder. A sound the human ear was not built to hear. The sound of air itself burning. And the dust kicked up by his daughter's sandals turned to glass behind them, mid-step, before it could fall. Genesis says, "Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities, and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew upon the ground." 3,000 years later, archaeologists digging at a site called Tal el-Hammam on the northeastern shore of the Dead Sea would unearth a destruction layer baked at temperatures over 2,000 degrees. Pottery vaporized into glass, spheres of pure sulfur, 90 to 95% pure, embedded in the ash, a purity not found anywhere else on Earth. They would publish their findings in peer-reviewed journals and conclude the only natural explanation was a cosmic airburst like Tunguska, but larger, lower, and aimed. What Moses wrote, the dirt has confirmed. But somewhere on that road, behind the running family, one set of footsteps slowed. Lot's wife. She had not wanted to leave. Not really. She had spent 20 years building a life inside those walls. Her loom in the front room, the little courtyard where she had nursed both her daughters, the marketplace where the merchants had finally begun to nod at her by name. She had been somebody in Sodom. In the hills, with 2 unmarried daughters and a husband whose witness had just collapsed in front of a laughing mob, she would be no one again. Her sandals slowed on the dusty road. Just one look, she thought. Just to remember. The Hebrew here is not the word for a glance. It is nabat acharav. It means to gaze, to regard with longing, to turn the whole self around. She did not peek over her shoulder. She stopped. She turned her body. She looked back at her city the way a woman looks at a man she still loves. And she was finished. The Bible does not say Lot turned around when he heard her stop. It does not say he tried to grab her hand. It just says she became a pillar of salt. And Lot kept running, with 2 daughters and the sound of his own breathing, and not one footstep behind him anymore. Centuries later, Jesus of Nazareth would teach an entire generation about the danger of divided loyalties using only 3 words. Remember Lot's wife. Because she did escape. Her body left Sodom, but her heart never did. And in the moment her body and her heart finally disagreed about which way to face, she lost. The cave smelled of damp stone and old smoke. Lot had begged the angels to let him flee to the little town of Zoar instead of the mountains. They had granted it. God had spared a whole city for one frightened man. But the moment Lot saw the smoke still rising from the plain, the moment he heard the murmuring of Zoar's people staring at the foreigner who had survived, fear took him again. Genesis says he was afraid to dwell in Zoar, and so he climbed up into the very mountains he had refused to go to in the first place. He took his 2 daughters, he found a cave, and he hid. The man who had once sat as a judge at the gate of the most powerful city in the Jordan Valley now lived in a hole in the rock. His wealth was ash. His wife was salt. His sons-in-law were buried under stone. And his witness, the witness he had spent decades building among the elders of Sodom, had died in 9 words at the doorway of men who thought he was joking. He had nothing left but 2 daughters, and the daughters had absorbed every lesson Sodom had ever taught. The fire had been small that night. The cave was deep. Outside, the wind moved across the bare hills like something hunting. The older sister sat across the fire from the younger one. Their father lay against the far wall, already asleep, his breathing thick and uneven, the way it had been for weeks now. He drank in the cave. He had not drunk much in Sodom. He drank now. The older sister had been turning the words over in her mouth for days, maybe weeks. She finally let them out.
"There is no man left,"
she said. The younger sister did not look up from the fire.
"The whole world is gone, sister. The plain, the cities, the men we were going to marry. There is nothing past those hills. We are the end of our father's line.
The younger sister did not move.
We have to preserve seed there."
There it was. The logic of Sodom transplanted from the city to the cave. Survival at any cost. The end justifies the means. There was no faith in this calculation, no thought that perhaps the God who had dragged their father out of fire might also provide them husbands. There was only the cold pragmatism of girls raised in a city where pragmatism was God. The younger sister lifted her eyes. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She just nodded once, the smallest nod a person can give. And then she looked away again into the fire and did not look up for a long time. They poured the wine that night. The cave floor was cold against his cheek when Lot woke. His head was a piece of broken pottery. His mouth tasted of stale wine and something else, something he could not place. There was a smell on the cloak he had pulled around himself in the dark, a smell that did not belong, the smell of his older daughter's hair. I dreamed something, he thought. There was something in the night. He sat up. His hands were shaking. His eldest daughter was outside the cave, drawing water from the seep in the rocks, her back to him. She did not turn around when he stirred. Why is she? He stopped the thought. He could not finish it. He could not let himself finish it. He pressed his palms against his eyes and he said out loud to the empty cave, the only thing he could bear to say,
I do not remember. I do not remember anything.
It was the prayer of a man who had spent a lifetime not remembering. He had not remembered Sodom's wickedness when he chose its valley. He had not remembered God's warning when he turned his wagons south after the rescue. He had not remembered his daughter's purity when he opened his door to a mob. He had spent 40 years training himself not to remember. And now, in the cave, the not remembering had become the only roof he had left. The second night, the daughters watched him drink. The younger one's hand trembled on the wineskin, just for a moment. The older one steadied it without a word. They had crossed something the first night that could not be uncrossed. To stop now would be to admit what they had already done. So they did not stop. They poured, they watched. And they did again what should never have been done once. 2 children were born of those 2 nights, and the daughters, far from being ashamed, named the boys with names that were public confessions. The older daughter stood at the mouth of the cave on the morning her son was born, the rising sun behind her, and she lifted the child up to the wind and named him Moab, from father. She said it loud enough that the wind carried it down into the valley. She was not whispering. She was not hiding. She was naming. The younger daughter named her son Ben-Ami, son of my kinsman.
Come.
The names were not euphemisms. They were declarations.
Into
The daughters were not
will
ashamed.
break.
They were proud.
Not
The
now.
logic of Sodom had won. And then Lot disappears. There is no death recorded, no burial, no final words, no prayer at the end. The man who had once chosen the best land in Canaan with his own eyes vanishes from the pages of the Bible somewhere in a cave so anonymous that Scripture does not even tell us where it was. The next time we turn the page, he is simply gone. But the children were not gone. Those two boys grew up. They had sons. Their sons had sons. And by the time Moses led the Hebrews out of Egypt 4 centuries later, the descendants of those two daughters had become 2 nations, the Moabites and the Ammonites. And for 1,000 years, they would war against the children of Israel. They would hire pagan prophets to curse them. They would seduce their men into idolatry. They would raid their borders. They would kill their soldiers. Somewhere in a valley east of the Jordan, a Hebrew boy of 18, his mother waiting for him at home in Bethlehem, a barley field he had not finished plowing, would die on a Moabite spear. He would never know that the man who killed him was, in the deepest genealogies, his cousin. That somewhere, generations back, a drunk old man in a cave had set in motion a war that was still killing Hebrew boys 1,000 years later. That was the final cost of choosing by sight. Sometimes the place we run to in fear becomes the place we lose what the fire never touched. Lot kept his life. He lost everything else. In a cave, he chose for himself. 2 men, 1 choice, 2 destinies. Abraham and Lot started in the same city. They walked the same road. They breathed the same desert air. They worshipped, at the beginning, the same God. And then one day, on a hilltop facing east, one of them lifted his eyes at a green valley, and the other lifted his eyes at the voice of God. Abraham yielded, and his descendants are stars. Lot grasped, and his descendants are warring shadows. The man who let go got everything. The man who grabbed lost everything. But the story of Lot, God be praised, does not end in the cave. 1,000 years later, in a barley field near Bethlehem, a young woman from the cursed line of Moab knelt at the feet of an Israelite man named Boaz. Her name was Ruth. She was a Moabitess, a daughter somewhere upstream of that cave. And she made a choice her ancestor had never been able to make. She said to her mother-in-law, "Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God." She chose by faith, and the redemption of Ruth was sealed at the gates of Bethlehem, at the city gate, in the very place Lot had once sat as a judge of Sodom. Where Lot had grown corrupt at a gate, Ruth was redeemed at one. Her great-grandson would be King David, and David's distant son would be Jesus of Nazareth, the Savior who reaches into every cave in every life and pulls out a redemption no one in the cave could imagine. The grace of God reached all the way back into the worst night Lot ever had and pulled the lineage of the Messiah out of it, which means there is hope, even for the man who chose wrong on the hilltop. Every morning, on a hilltop only you can see, you stand between 2 valleys. One looks greener, one looks harder. One promises everything your eyes want, the other promises only the voice that called Abraham. Lot looked once and never recovered. Abraham looked up and inherited the stars. What are you looking at this morning? If this story moved you today, take a moment and ask yourself the question Lot never stopped to ask. Where in your own life have you been choosing by sight when God has been asking you to choose by faith? Maybe it is a relationship. Maybe it is a job. Maybe it is the city you live in or the company you keep. Maybe it is something only you and God know. If this video stirred something in you, give it a like. Share it with someone who is standing on a hilltop today, trying to choose between two valleys. And subscribe to the channel, because the next story we are about to tell will move you even more than this one. Then leave a comment below. Which choice is harder for you? The one that looks like Lot's plain, or the one that looks like Abraham's hills? We are praying with you. The gates of Sodom or the tents of Mamre, the choice is still being made. Today, by you.